Reach Human Presence. Super Sniffer Grandma helps researchers identify Parkinson's disease by odor. Parkinson's is a disease that affects a sizable percentage of the elderly population. About 60,000 Americans are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease each year. This neurodegenerative disease could lead to progressive brain cell death and a loss of motor functions. According to the CDC, Parkinson's is the second most common neurodegenerative disease after Alzheimer's. Current treatments can help alleviate some of the physical effects, like muscle tremors, but there is no cure. Diagnosis is also complicated. There's no simple test. Once a patient has started to express some of the physical symptoms, it takes complicated brain imaging to confirm that certain brain cells have been damaged or destroyed. The scientific community had been researching how to properly diagnose this disease before the late visible symptoms. Joy Milne, the woman with the super nose, who is also a retired nurse, happened to be the hero in this incredible story. The lead author on the research, Perdita Barron, says she found out about the woman who can smell Parkinson's from a fellow researcher who was holding a public conference on his Parkinson's research. At the end of the public conference, Joy stood up to ask a particularly strange question at the time. "Why aren't you doing something about the fact that people with Parkinson's smell?" she asked. Apparently her husband suffers from Parkinson's disease, and she had observed the similar odor among other patients. The man holding the conference initially shrugged off the question, but the next day he talked about the strange question with another professor at the university, and after much deliberation, they decided to look for this woman with the super nose. They tracked her down. She was Joy Milne, a retired nurse living in Perth, a town near Edinburgh. Before her husband was diagnosed, Joy had noticed an onset of a strange odor in her husband. A familiar odor that can be traced when she walks in a room with Parkinson's patients. A few years later, her husband would pass on. The research team first had to confirm Milne's abilities. So they conducted what they called the T-shirt test. They recruited a handful of Parkinson's patients and a control group of people without Parkinson's to sleep in identical T-shirts. Then, without telling her who was who, they presented them one at a time to Milne. Not only did she correctly identify which T-shirts belonged to Parkinson's patients, she could also identify them based on the strength of the odor, even matching T-shirts that had been worn by the same person. Joy Milne has been dubbed a super smeller by scientists, who have marveled at her ability to identify people who have the disease before they show any symptoms. In an interview with Agence France Presse in 2015, Milne described the smell as a heavy, slightly musky odor. Milne also said that she realized she could sniff up Parkinson's when she attended a patient support group with her husband, and found out that everyone in the room smelled the same. She thought little more about it, until she mentioned the odor to Tylo Kenneth, a neurobiologist who studies Parkinson's at Edinburgh University. Kenneth and Milne embarked on more rigorous scientific tests to try to identify the specific compounds causing the odor that Milne was picking up. The researchers used a technique called gas chromatography mass spectrometry. During the study, researchers swabbed the upper backs of the participants in order to collect samples of sebum, a waxy substance secreted all over the body. During the study, the researchers collected sebum samples from more than 1,000 people from all over the UK, and started developing a non-invasive test to detect Parkinson's disease at an earlier stage. It took a few years for the research to pass through grant proposals and some very skeptical funding review panels. Fast forward to 2019, the research was successful. We now have a library, a small library, of volatile biomarkers that we can use to diagnose Parkinson's from people's sebum, Barron said. Barron also said that the odor signature seems to be apparent years before most people have symptoms and are diagnosed with Parkinson's. She said using a smell test to detect the disease before symptoms occur may allow for earlier treatment and potentially preventive medicine. If we can do that with our test, then we can start to work with drug discovery to see whether we can stop the symptoms at a much earlier stage, Barron said. It's been superb. The support has been absolutely wonderful. For people with Parkinson's, this is a game changer. And it was all possible due to the discovery of this super nose granny. She had also moved on to other collaborative projects and research since then. For instance, she discovered that Alzheimer's smells vaguely like vanilla, while cancer has a more earthy odor. In her next collaboration with the Manchester group, the aim will be to identify chemicals that produce a signature odor for tuberculosis. It is possible that in the near future, medical facilities would have olfactory departments that easily diagnose patients in a non-invasive and more comfortable way.